Hi and welcome back to FreeEduHub. Today, as part of the series of lectures on ethical hacking, we'll be covering defensive techniques. Now, as you know that as a security professional, it's important to be knowledgeable about various technologies and techniques that can prevent attacks and secure an organization's resources. These defensive techniques aim to either prevent the attacks altogether or minimize their impact. However, it is critical to acknowledge that the best defenses and best attacks can happen, and it will happen at any time because all these adversaries are constantly looking for new techniques in penetrating in your organization. So this session will cover all the important aspects of setting up strong defenses and being prepared to respond effectively for any sort of attacks that you will face or you are facing at the moment. This involves active defense and incident response, etc. Further, we'll be talking about different incident response may have legal implications. Security incidents can be considered crimes, so it is important to handle them with care. In some cases, pursuing a civil lawsuit or pressing the criminal charges can be or will be necessary, leading to a formal investigation. Such investigation involves specific techniques for gathering and processing the information, evidence, and potentially presenting it in the court of law. So we'll see what we will have in the outline of this chapter. As you can see that in this chapter, the learning objectives are to perform the incident handling, identity security controls, and apply defensive tools and techniques. Then we look at the definition of security incident, followed by the process of incident response. Then we'll see the incident response plans, and then planning for the disaster recovery and evidence handling and administration, etc. Further, we'll be talking about requirements for regulated industries. Now, if we talk about the key concepts, the incident response and concepts and processes will be discussed. We'll be talking about incident response plans and disaster recovery plans. Further, we'll be looking at the evidence handling and requirements for regulated industries. Now, what is a security incident? All security should start with a security policy. So whenever you are defining or you are thinking seriously about security of your organization, you must have a proper security policy. A policy is a thing or a document in which you have all rules and regulations which are predefined for any specific incident, that what would be the course of action if a certain incident will take place. Security policy is a high-level description of how an organization defines a security environment. A security control is a technical or non-technical mechanism that enforces the security policy. So once you have a security policy, you will have a security control for that also, just to make sure that how you will achieve that target. Then we have an event, an observable occurrence in a computer device or a network, something that you can see in form of an event or an activity or a log from a firewall or incident response system, which would highlight that an activity is taking place on the network. An incident is any event that results in violation of the security policy, possesses an imminent threat to the security policy. So in a nutshell, we can say that it includes definitions of acceptable and unacceptable behaviors, requirements to protect sensitive resources or any external obligations such as regulations and customer vendor requirements, etc. A security control is a mechanism, technical or non-technical, that enforces aspects of the security policy. Many organizations have controls that do not align with their policy, and that's why they end up having lots of issues related to the security incidents in their organizations. Now, as you know that in a computing environment, various activities occur such as user logins, resources access, and network traffic, etc. Each of these occurrences is referred to as an event. An event is any observable happening in a computer device network, which is often recorded in terms of the log files or the events as we discussed earlier. So after security incident, the next topic that we have is that the incident response process. What is it? Security professionals are responsible for reducing the chances of security breach. So it's their responsibility to make sure that your environment is safe. Plan for how you will react when a security incident will happen. That of course depends on the policies and procedures you have. If you have well written rules and regulations, you'll be able to handle it in a better way. Planning allows you to respond proactively, so you don't have to waste time in looking for the right procedures. A proper security incident response determines whether you deal with the incident efficiently and completely, or allows the incident to get worse or out of control. So you must have enough resources and the expertise in order to handle any situation like that. Evidence collected may be intangible, so that we are once collecting the data from the event logs or from the firewalls, all that data is usually considered intangible. Computer crime in any criminal act in which a computer or a computer device is, or a source target or an attack is used as an instrument to commission any kind of activity. Now, as a security professional, you know that it's impossible to eliminate the risk completely. Therefore, it is critical to have a plan in place to respond to the security incidents. And only if you have a proper plan, you can proactively address incidents instead of merely reacting to them, which can lead to better outcomes as well. In cases where computer crimes involved activities crossing state or national borders, the rules and definitions can be significantly different. So you'll have to pay special attention to that as well. Thus, all kind of security incidents or computer crime is defined as a criminal act where a computer or a computer device is a source or a target of the attack, or is used as a source to commit that crime. This can include activities that impact the national security, involve fraud, identity theft, or distribution of malware, etc. It is important to note that whether the activities are conducted over the internet or within the private network, that does not affect the definition. Now we'll look at the policies, procedures, and guidelines for incident response. Typically, it includes the security incident response policy, individuals responsible for determining whether if it's a security incident has occurred. So there will be set of individuals who will investigate, and they'll update that if it was a minor attempt, if it was a penetration, or someone successfully penetrated in the network. Individuals or departments to be a part of initial notification that the security incident has occurred. So you must have a set of departments to which you will immediately notify that something happened on the network. It means that through which they will be notified: email, phone, or messaging applications, or face-to-face. So what will be the actual mean of communication when you are informing that an incident took place, whether you'll be using telephones, messaging service, or it would be face-to-face communication. Responsible person or parties that will take in the lead in responding to the incident. So there will be a team lead to handle these kind of situations. So all the investigations which the team members are conducting, all the feedback would be provided to the team leader, and then they'll be talking to the head of the departments. Appropriate response guidelines for the given security incidents are usually given so that they are handling it in a highly professional manner. After that, we have different phases of an investigation and incident response. First of all, we'll talk about preparation. We'll have to prepare for the investigation and the documentation which is required for that. Create a train of computer security incident response team. We call it as CSIRT as well. They develop plan for handling incidents, assign roles, responsibilities, assemble supplies, hardware, software needed to conduct any sort of investigation like that. Then we have incident identification, establish what has occurred, and if it is an actual security incident, the CSIRT makes this determination and start the response process. So it's not like if it was an attempt on the network for any kind of information leak or anything like that, and you'll identify it as an incident. You will identify it, but it would be identified as a response to any kind of attack. Maybe you had proper systems which defended your infrastructure for that, so you'll have to check for other systems if they are also protected by any kind of attacks which are coming from outside or not. Then you have containment. The CSIRT would contains and controls the damage of the incident has caused or is causing in an early as possible. Balance requirement to limit the damage against the need to preserve the evidence. The response team or the incident response team set the priorities for the CSIRT. So now you'll have to see the magnitude of the damage that has been made if someone successfully penetrated in the network. You'll have to see that what are the other services which are affected by that. Then you'll have to have a balance requirement to limit the damage, so that if one server is compromised, the person is not able to spread its payloads to the other nearby servers. And you'll have to preserve the evidence as well, because if you have identified, you'll have the proper log images or the proper snapshot of the server itself, just to make to maintain an evidence of it, that you identified it and something like that was happening on the network. So then it would be the response team, incident response team, would set the priorities for the CSIRT to make the appropriate or take the appropriate actions on that. Then we have investigation. In investigation, methodically collect the evidence without destroying or altering. Internal or external team may investigate or analyze the incident. So you might have seen in our course on digital forensics, we covered the same thing, that we try to make sure not to make any changes to the actual asset or the actual target. So we create an image of it and then we investigate on the image, because it's a true copy or a replica of the actual system. So in that way we can preserve the evidence, and at the same time we are using different tools in order to further investigate of the kind of magnitude of the attack or the different payloads that have been used in order to launch that attack. Then we have eradication. It removes the vulnerability that allows the incident to occur. So you'll identify that the main reason for it, maybe it was a backdoor, or it was a Trojan, or it was a malware. You'll remove it from the system so that the penetrator cannot gain access to that remotely again after a week or a month or after a couple of hours. Recovery and repair. In a recovery and repair, it returned the affected systems to the operational state, because you'll make the system offline and then you'll conduct the analysis on it, remove any sort of contaminated items or the viruses, malwares, etc. from the system, and then you'll make it operational so that it's not affecting your business. Rebuild a system after the evidence has been collected. Repair any potential damage that has made. Maybe you'll have to set up a new system, maybe you'll have to back up and restore the data. So you'll do everything in that recovery and repair. And it's very important to note down the time which is required in order to set up the secondary system or rebuild a system and then implement it for the production purposes. Finally, we have lesson learned. Obtain a feedback from everyone involved. Determine why the incident occurred. Determine why you did right, what you did right and what you did wrong, and identify how you need to improve it. Apply findings to improve the incident response. So it's not like an incident took place and you know it, you took some preventive measures, and then that's end of the case. You learn it from there, and then you'll determine that why it happened, what were your mistakes, how can you improve it, how can you protect these systems, and how can you make sure that this does not happen again. All these findings are usually logged somewhere, so that you'll have to make sure that you are following the same rules and regulations in order to protect the systems. Maybe you learned some new things in this one and you identified some weaknesses of the system. Make sure that these weaknesses are not followed in rest of the configuration changes that you are making on the system. Once that's done, we'll try to understand that what is an incident response team, which we say as IRT as well. It's a specific team designated to handle incident response activities, often refers to as a computer security incident response team. Now IRT are the first responders, and it would include the IT personals that you have. You can have a legal representation, management and designers for the affected operations department, human resource, public relations, security officers, or maybe chief security officer or chief information security officer, which you should be informed as soon as something like that takes place. Now keep in mind that incident response team members require appropriate training and experience to effectively handle and investigate the security incidents. As a security professional, it's likely that you will be involved in such a team, possibly a key member of the team. So you must have all the information about the systems, their security, the kind of patches you have applied, the kind of systems you have. Only then you can protect your own infrastructure. Next, we have our incident response plans, that what should be the plan for any specific thing. Now, incident response plans, which we say as IRP, it includes all steps and details required to respond to an incident through all phases. So we'll break it down into steps, and then we'll see that if this thing will happen, that would be the course of action. If this thing would happen, what would you do? And it would continue like that. Then you have business continuity plan. It's a key security component, defines how organization would maintain a normal day-to-day business after security incident or other disruptive event would take place. So the main goal of the business is to make sure that your business is running without having any kind of issues, so that your customers don't feel bad that they are not able to access the services from your website. You must have a proper plan that if an incident takes place, how fast can you be back in the business, or what are the measures that you'll take in order to avoid those things. Disaster recovery plan defines how personnel or assets would be safeguarded in an event of a disaster, and how assets would be restored or brought back to the operating state after a disaster passes. So that's the plan of the organization, that how they would fight a specific disaster and what would be the recovery of it. If they have the proper systems, how fast they can build the system, if they can recover the assets or not, if they can restore the data, and if they can restore the operating system, and all those different things. So that's the responsibility of disaster recovery plan. Next, we would look at some of the techniques that we can adapt for business continuity. First of all, we can have fault tolerance, the capacity of a system to keep functioning in the face of a hardware or a software failure. So we must have a fault tolerance, that we must have backup systems or backup power source or backup servers or RAID, etc., just to make sure that if a fault happens, you must have a backup plan, and the system should automatically switch to that, just to make sure that you are comfortably running the same services. Now, the fault tolerance devices could be RAID, for example, a redundant array of independent disks, an array of disks that can be configured so that if one disk fails, access to the data or applications is not affected. So there are different levels of RAID that can be configured. It could be RAID level 0, 1, 5 or 10, depends what kind of setup you have and how you are configuring the data. A simplex example is a mirror array, on which on RAID we'll configure 2 hard drives. If you have 2 hard drives on the server, one hard drive would be maintaining a 100% replica of the second hard drive. So if the first hard drive fails, still the server would be able to perform, but it would identify that one disk failed, so you can replace the disk. Once the disk is replaced, it would manage the data, or it would rebuild the data on the second disk so that it is again in the healthy state. Now, server clustering is a technique used to group servers in such a way that if one server fails, access to the applications is not lost. You might have seen it in Active Directory setup. We usually have Active Directory 1 and Active Directory 2. So in case if you are applying some patches or restarting the actual Active Directory, your data is still saved on the Active Directory 2. Once the one would come back, the 2 would update it with the changes that has been made on the Active Directory itself. Now, redundant power can be provided by using the system, such as the backup of the generators, uninterrupted power supplies, etc. So you might have seen that most of the organizations are using UPS, which depends on the capacity load of your data center. It could be 5 kVA, 10 kVA, 20 kVA, depending on the load on your systems. In addition to that, since you know that the UPS can perform for a certain number of hours, after that, once the batteries would be exhausted, it would shut down as well. To have a updated and redundant power source, usually we have a diesel powered generators as well, which we can use if there is a prolonged discontinuation of power from the power grid. Now, cloud services and virtual machines is another way with the help of which we can make sure that our business is still working. It provides the ability to quickly provision servers and resources based on the needs. Organization may have rebuilt the systems or the servers, often defined as virtual machines, ready to be addressed and started. Resources are already available and they are being properly backed up, so you can be back in business as soon as a disaster happens. Now, techniques for ensuring a business continuity is, further, we have high availability as well. High availability means availability indicates and gauge how well the system is providing its service. It can be achieved by having redundant or reliable backup systems with nimble traffic redirect. So we'll have another system which would be running in parallel to the primary system, so that if the first one would fail, the second one would immediately take over. Alternate sites are a separate location from which to conduct business operations in an event of a disaster. We distinguish it into cold site, warm site, and hot site. So a cold site is most inexpensive site to maintain. It contains no backed up copies of the hardware. Infrastructure has to be built. So there is a longer outage period, so you can say that you have a space somewhere at a offsite which can be utilized if there is an issue, but this site is not equipped with any kind of setup. It means that you'll not have any servers, you'll not have any backup, you'll not have any infrastructure, cooling or anything. You just have a space to run the operations from. Then we have a warm site. It contains some of the information or the necessary hardware in place along with the power and internet connectivity. Backup may be on hand. So you'll have the servers, maybe you don't have the proper cooling mechanism on there, but you'll have the hardware available. All you need to do is just to restore the data on those servers and run the operations from there. Then we have a hot site. A hot site carries the greatest amount of the expense, but it is little to no downtime, is highly synchronized with the primary site. So it is always connected to the main system. The changes that you are making to the primary system, they'll be replicated on this system as well. So if the primary site fails, you'll be able to run your operations comfortably from this site. Just keep in mind that running a hot site is always very expensive because you are running the same operations from two different places. After that, we look at recovering systems. In recovering systems from a security incident, refer to your plan to recover the operations quickly. Assess the damage, complete the investigation, conduct the recovery process, recover the systems and environment as soon as possible, and generate a report that what happened and the ability to communicate with the appropriate team members. So as we covered all those things, we'll have to make sure that we have a proper plan. We'll assess the damage, we'll investigate what happened, what was the recovery process, how much time it took, and how you recovered the systems, and then you'll generate a detailed report that could be communicated to the higher management just to inform that what took place and how you managed the situation. Now, loss control and damage assessment includes that they assess the scope of the damage and determine the course of action, determine what was the scope of it and what would be the course of action if it happens, determine the amount of the damage. For example, if it was a virtual damage or a physical damage, a virtual damage examines the log files and identify the compromised accounts, etc. So you'll have to make sure that all accounts which are available are safe. It's not like if the accounts were compromised, if you're using the same accounts, the person from the external entity can use the same accounts in order to penetrate in your systems again. A physical damage takes a physical inventory of the systems, that if certain things were burnt or if they are not functional or the systems completely stopped working, or maybe you'll have to reinstall the operating system or the databases, etc. Determine if the attack is over or still if it is in progress. So you'll have to make sure that you'll deny the attack or all the attempts which were there or which took place at a certain moment of time. Now, inside the organization, it's important to determine which members should receive the report of the security incident. The incident response team should clearly spell out the chain of command and communication requirements, as well as a trained CSIRT team will know that with whom they must communicate. This should be someone who has accountability and responsibility for safeguarding the organization assets. These individuals can differ depending on the organization, but each ultimately has accountability for security within the organization. For example, we have Chief Information Security Officers, we have Information Security Officer, Chief Security Officer, Chief Executive Officer, Chief Information Officer, and Chief Operating Officer. So you'll have to find out that to whom you shall be updating about any incident which takes place in the organization. Then we have Business Impact Analysis. Business impact analysis refers to the process of analyzing existing risk and documenting strategies to minimize the identified risk. So we'll have a risk assessment of all the assets that we have within an organization, and then we'll calculate that how can we minimize those risks for those particular assets. It demonstrates the costs such as the work backlogs, profit loss, overtime, repair and replacement of the legal fee, or the public relations and insurance cost, etc. So all those things would be included as part of your business impact analysis, because it is at the end of the day affecting the business operations that were affected after an incident. Now, business impact analysis report emphasizes on the importance of each of the various business components and purposes, fund allocation strategies to protect them in future, etc. Then we have planning for disaster recovery. In planning for disaster recovery, we'll identify what organization needs to conduct, why the organization, and what the organization needs to conduct the business operations. Evaluate proper redundancy measures for critical resources. So you must make sure that if a specific resource has been compromised, what is the redundancy plan for that, how you are maintaining it. Check with the critical service providers to evaluate the adequate protection has been taken to guarantee that the service provided will be available. So you'll install the things, for example, the protections, the firewalls, the endpoint protection systems, etc., just to make sure that your services are not affected by any of the attacks which are taking place from outside. You'll have your first line of defense against those kind of attacks which can potentially harm your business. Evaluate the existing service level agreement so that you know what constitutes acceptable downtime. So you must have a proper written service level agreement with the partners and even with the vendor who is providing you the services, just to make sure that they are able to resolve the problem or the service within a specific time. Establish a mechanism for communication that does not require company resources, so to whom you shall be informing, whether it is required to inform, when it should be informed, and all those things. Ensure designated alternate sites can be accessed immediately. If you have a hot site, cold site, or a warm site, if it's available, and how much time it would take in order to run your services from there. Identify and document any of the points of failure. So it's not like you are hiding the things by not writing it, because it would affect you if something like that happens again. So each and every bit of information shall be noted down. Ensure that the company redundant storage is secure, so that if the primary storage would fail, you'll be able to get the data from the redundant storage and run the operations from there. Then we have testing and evaluation. Test and evaluate the plan. So once you have defined the plan, you'll have to test it as well, that if it is working as it is intended to work. Then review the plan regularly and adapt if necessary, and even make the changes to it if it is required. Consider events that affect diminish the plan strength. So if there are any weaknesses of the plan which could compromise the strength of the plan, you could work on that in order to remove all those hurdles from that, so that in case of a disaster you don't have a weakness with the help of which the other person would take or gain power in order to penetrate in the network. Emphasize the plan strength and weaknesses during the evaluation and testing. So you'll identify that these are our system strengths and these are the weaknesses. So you'll have to focus on the weaknesses so that you can convert them into the strengths of the system. Engage parties and teams with the special skills and training if necessary. So if you think that a special or a new kind of attack, for example ransomware, is spreading quite fast on the networks, if your team is has the proper knowledge for that, or they need specific tools or any hardware in order to fight those kind of challenges, you'll provide training for them and determine if training is needed and verify the effectiveness of the plan, that how effective it is working in order to run the services. Now, preparation and staging of the testing procedures. Now, when we stage the testing and procedures, the testing suite that can be performed or planned would include various activities in this one. First of all, we have walkthrough. A walkthrough is a type of test which the members of the disaster recovery team would get together around a table and read through the plan together. The goal is to examine all of the steps and note how each department gets responsibilities handed off to it and how it would interact with the systems. Now, this type of test will uncover the potential gaps and the bottlenecks in the response. Then we have checklist. Checklist is a type of test which will assist in verifying the sufficient supplies and stored and available at the backup site. Contact information is current and the recovery plan is accessible and available to all who need it in terms of or in case of an emergency. The recovery team should review and identify weakness areas as well as note which resource is available. Then we have simulation. In simulation, in this type of test, a disaster is simulated in such a way that normal business operations are not adversely affected. Such a test seeks to simulate a disaster as accurately as practical given to the budget and the situation. Features of this test includes practicing backup and restore operations, incident response, communication and coordination or efforts, and alternate site usage, etc., and other similar details. Now, tasks of this process cannot be economical or practically completed, should be omitted where necessary, including travel requirements, taking down the systems, or the involvement of certain teams, etc. Then we have full interruption and parallel interruption. Parallel is running two systems altogether and then checking that if both systems are running and we have backed up the data and restored the data, if both systems are able to provide a exactly same output, since we have changed the system and we want to make sure that it is not affecting the overall output of the system. Then full interruption. In this type of the test, the complete disaster recovery plan is enhanced or it's used under simulation conditions. This test will be very closely simulate a disaster, including a damage such as a communication and other services would be completely stopped, and because of this type of the test interrupt the services, and the organization itself should be extremely cautious and should exercise to avoid major effect of the organization. And you must make sure that after this kind of interruption you have the tools and skills to bring these systems back as they were working ideally. Now, ideally, this kind of test should be scheduled during the slow periods or at the end of the month or after the business hours or at any point when the critical business operations are usually not affected by that. Then we have testing frequency. Testing is not a one-time event. You'll have to constantly test your systems, conduct testing on a regular basis to ensure that the plan remains effective, and the test should be considered and run as often as practical. Next, we have analysis of the test reports. Now, the test results that we will receive in response to any kind of analysis, the testing provides the data on how well the plan is working. Testing provides feedback on the disaster recovery team, what were their findings, if they found any other weaknesses in the system, assess the test results, that how can we improve them, if there are any weaknesses of it which are identified after these analysis, we'll have to work on that. Analyze recommendations regarding the improvement or modification of the plan, and then quantitatively measure the test results. For example, elapsed time to perform various activities, accuracy of each activity, and the amount of the work or the amount of the work completed in order to complete this specific task. So we can say the testing and disaster recovery plan is essential and is likely to result in modifications to enhance the plan and improve the recovery process. The testing process should be efficient and cost effective while continually improving the plan and the skills of the people who are involved in that. By thoroughly testing the plan, an organization gains confidence and valuable experience to effectively respond to real emergency situations. It is important to conduct both scheduled and unscheduled tests for various scenarios, including the partial or total disasters, etc. And that's exactly what we are covering in this slide, that we'll test the things of the time response and other things. And then we'll have analysis of test results. Test result may lead to change plan and should include scheduled and unscheduled tests for the total or partial disasters. Now we have evidence handling and administration. So we'll see that how can we handle the evidence and how can we properly manage it. Now in this one, the evidence is necessary to identify, for example, what happened, scope of the incident, extent to which it affected, and source of the incident. So we have covered all these things, that we'll find out what actually happened, what was the scope of it, how many machines or servers were affected, what was the extent of the effect, like if it affected lots of other services as well, what's the source of the incident, from where it spreaded, and even evidence collection techniques, etc. would include. Let the forensic specialist collect the evidence whenever possible. So you'll have a team of forensics or the forensic specialist who will investigate to find out the weaknesses and would try to gather the information for the data that has been deleted from these systems, or the tools or the skill sets or the payloads which were used in order to conduct any kind of attacks on these systems. Now, no voice can carelessly damage the evidence, make investigation unlikely to produce meaningful results, or rendering the case indefensible in the court. So you'll have to make sure that the source has not been damaged by any means. Now we'll see different kind of evidences which are there. We have best, secondary, and direct. The best is the evidence is a category of evidence that is admissible by requirements in any court of law. In this case, the document's best evidence is the original document. The existing of best evidence eliminates your ability to use any copies of the same evidence in the court. So that would be the exact copy or how you actually found the data. The secondary evidence is the evidence that is a copy of the original evidence. It is or it could include the items such as the backup drives or the images. In this type of evidence may not always be admissible in the court of law and is not admissible in the best evidence of the item exists. So you will use the secondary evidence for your own investigation, but it is usually not acceptable in the court of law. Direct evidence is received as the result of the testimony or interview of an individual regarding something that personally or the person directly experienced. So the person who was using the system, or maybe it happened due to his or her mistake. So that's a form of direct evidence. Then we have further other categories of it, and we call it as conclusive, opinion, corroborative, or the circumstantial evidence. Now the conclusive is the evidence that is above the dispute. So that's a final remark. There is no dispute of it, and that's the real evidence that we have. Opinion is the evidence that is based on individual background, maybe the expert or non-expert opinion on the evidence that it is quite possible that maybe something like that happened, or it could be an opinion of a person. Corroborative is the evidence obtained from multiple sources and supportive in nature. It does not stand on its own, so you'll have to provide the evidence logs from the log files, from the firewalls, from the intrusion protection systems, maybe from the switches, concluding that based on these evidences, we are sure that something like that happened. Circumstantial evidence is that indirectly proves the fact through the use of the deduction logic. For example, that if something like that happens, we have seen that something like that happens after that as well. So you are building your case. Then we have chain of custody. Now, a chain of custody, the documents and whereabouts of the evidence from the collection of the presentation in the court and after. So, maintaining a chain of custody is crucial when collecting the evidence in the court, etc. The chain of the custody refers to the documents and the movements of the evidence from the collection to its preparation in court and beyond, including the return or the destruction process. A reliable chain of custody ensures that the evidence remains unchanged throughout the process. Any breaks or uncertainties in the chain of custody can lead to the evidence being deemed or inadmissible or potential result in the dismissal of the case. It is important to include the detailed information about the evidence and from where it was collected and handling information after it has been presented in the court. Enforcing the chain of custody involves 6 key points that should be considered at every stage of the investigation. These points help ensure the proper handling of the information. Maintaining the chain of custody can be achieved by asking the following questions. For example, what evidence has been collected? How was the evidence maintained or obtained? And when was the evidence collected? Who are the individuals who handled the evidence? What reasons did each person have for handling the evidence, and where the evidence has traveled and where it has been stored, etc. So once we have the answers to these questions, we can easily defend the case in the court of law. The computer or device removal, for example, chain of the custody may be followed when removing the computers or devices from the crime scene, may require legal authorization to move anything from there. So as we can see, maintaining an up-to-date chain of custody is crucial. Investigator must record and update every incident or the evidence handling, including the detail of its composition, origin and delivery location, etc. It's essential to avoid any gaps in the chain of custody. To enhance the legal protection, evidence can be validated using hashing techniques to ensure the integrity remains intact. The ideal scenario is to present the same evidence in the court that was collected at the crime scene. It is important to remember that lack of verifiable chain of custody can significantly impact the case and potential leading to its loss or the dismissal of the case. After that, we have rules of evidence. Now, rules of evidence shall be reliable, consistent and trustworthy evidence that leads to a common conclusion. It should be preserved well. Good records can help identify and prove the preservations of the evidence. The question must maintain the chain of custody. It should be relevant. It means that the evidence that directly relates to the case being tried in the court, and properly identified evidence can be for which record can be provide proof for the proper preservation and identification, and it should be legal permissible. Evidence is deemed by the judge to fit the rules of evidence from the court and the case at hand. Then we have the security reporting options and guidelines. Now, effective communication with relevant parties is an essential part of incident management. It is important to consider the organizational structure and hierarchy when developing incident communication strategies, including after incident reports, etc. Proper communication and identifying the appropriate recipients can significantly impact the effectiveness of the security incident response. It is crucial to ensure that all personnel are aware of the reporting and response procedures to avoid confusion during the incident. So, refer to the guidelines as the document in the company reported in incident response plan. Consider whether the incident must be reported to the law enforcement in addition to the company personnel, or consider whether the security incident must be reported to the regulatory body and required by the law. Document the incident in a company incident report if it is reported outside the organization. So that depends on the policy of the organization, that if they want to investigate the case within the organization, or they want to take it to the court, or what are the proper rules and regulations for that specific organization in handling such kind of situations. It will include the following security incident report: a timeline of the events of the actions when it took place, a risk assessment including the details of the state of the system before and after the security incident, so you'll make sure that the system is working perfectly fine even after the incident took place. A detailed list of all the participants who took part in the discovery, assessment and the resolution of the security incident, so complete detail of those individuals would be reported. that the people who actually investigated the incident, the detailed list of the reasons behind the decision made, that what were the decisions made based on the weaknesses found in the system, recommendations as to what can be done to prevent the repeat the incident to reduce the damage. So what are the steps taken or the lesson learned from this kind of attack, and how can you improve your systems in order to protect them against any sort of attacks in future? Now create two sections, a long report with specific details and sections, and a high level executive summary of it, just to give a highlight information of actually what happened. Now we'll see that what are the requirements for the regulated industries. In certain industries such as utilities, finance, and healthcare, organization must comply with specific legal requirements for protecting information. These regulations dictate data protection needs and other obligations. Security professionals working in regulated industries should exercise caution when implementing the security solution, and if needed, seek the legal assistance to ensure the compliance with the relevant regulations, etc. Now, for payment card industry, IRPs must describe the roles and responsibilities and communication strategies in event of a compromise. That what would happen, that for example, if a organization's database has been leaked out with all the details of the credit card, what would be the strategies and how fast they are liable to inform the customers, coverage and response capabilities for critical systems and their components, notifications requirements for credit card association and acquirers, business continuity planning, reference to the inclusion of the incident response procedures from the card association, and analysis of the legal requirements for reporting the compromise. So in most of the cases, it's a legal requirement to update the customers immediately if their credit card data has been leaked out from a website, so that they can take appropriate measures in order to block their credit cards or to change their pins immediately. Due diligence is a process of investigating any and all security incidents and related issues penetrating to a particular situations. So you must be always careful and make sure that you are using the best practices in order to protect the identity of your customers and their data which is available on your servers. Due process is a key idea that when a policy or a rule is broken, disciplinary measures are applied uniformly and the employees are not considered guilty until the proper process has been followed. So everyone is liable and bound to follow the terms and conditions which are there, which are the rules and regulations and policies for the company, and they'll take the disciplinary action based on the policies they have, just to make sure that the proper process has been followed. So we can say that ensuring due care, due diligence, and due process is important for protecting oneself and the organization. Due care involves maintaining and using the assets in accordance with the company policies, including guidelines and safe equipment use, etc. Due diligence is the process of thoroughly investigating security incidents and related issues to maintain effective policies and avoid violations of the laws and rules and regulations. Lastly, due process ensures that fair and uniform application and disciplinary measures, treating all employees equally and respecting the civil rights of everyone. Following these principles, we can help to protect the company from potential legal issues. Now that brings us to the end of the chapter, and the summary is that we covered incident response concepts and processes, then we talked about incident response plans, we talked about disaster recovery plans and evidence handling, etc. Finally, we talked about requirements for regulated industries. So that was our lecture on defensive techniques. Thank you very much.